Get Rich Education is brought to you by Audible. More than 150,000 audiobooks to choose from for your mobile device.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 24. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. You know, education is the shortest distance between poverty and wealth. People want change, but they don't take action. You've distinguished yourself as someone that does. When it comes right down to it, everyone is a financial trader. But most people are making a bad trade because they're trading time for money. It's the worst trade of your life because we can't get more time. We all know it. Long ago, to me, real estate investing, that seemed like something that somebody else did. I was slow to get interested in it. I thought real estate investing meant that a person would have to own some old pickup truck and there would be a ladder rattling around in the back of the truck half the time. You'd have some old leather tool belt by the passenger seat ready to go at any time. You'd be used to sniffing drywall dust up your nostrils from doing your own rehabs. I mean, thank God that it doesn't. When I started 12 years ago, I didn't know how to fix anything, and I still don't, and I own millions of dollars worth of property in multiple states and countries. I just focused on finding the property manager that handled the maintenance stuff, and I did it in a very straightforward way with bank loans. Well, a few shows ago, I mentioned that in my local market alone, I've turned that first $12,000 cashier's check, which I still have, as a down payment on a fourplex, into $1.7 million worth of property since 2002. And I'm in a lot of other markets. And a lot of that time since 2002, I really didn't even pay attention to what was going on. Well, I actually miscalculated. I've turned that $12,000 into $2.2 million of property since then, not 1.7. I actually forgot about a property. I don't have that happen very often. Now, if you come from the stock world, you don't know how that's possible. If you're an experienced real estate investor, you know how that and more is possible. I actually heard a joke about stocks that's pretty good. Here we go. How do you get $1 million in the stock market? You start with $2 million. I love that. And the important thing is here with real estate and these great gains, I don't do any of the work. The property managers in all these markets send me monthly cash flow checks from the tenant rents. And this is just buy and hold real estate investing of properties where on the day I buy them, they don't need any rehab work and they're fully tenanted. That's what I help you do here. Now, coming up, I have some real estate royalty appearing on the show like Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy. For today, recently I've had some inquiries that went like this. Keith, what if I don't even have that $12,000 or whatever to start, or my credit score is bad, or my employment history is shaky, and I can't even get a bank loan? Well, I've responded and lined up a few guests to help you with that over the next few weeks. And today's guest, Massey, has become very well accomplished himself, and he started out with even less than what you have. Jay and his wife were squatting in bank-owned property. He had a credit score of 398, and then they both lost their health. I mean, talk about it being easy to quit your daydream. Well, Jay's a giant success today by using none of his own money to acquire real estate, showing deals to strangers at Starbucks on the back of a napkin to get $50,000 from each one of them for down payment and funding money. Jay didn't have the means to rent a hotel conference room and put on some fancy presentation with glossy brochures. In fact, with the hundreds of properties that Jay currently owns, to this day, he's still never gotten a bank loan, so he sure can show you how to do it too. Sometimes the problem is not the problem. The problem is how you think about the problem. So let's hear more about how Jay did it and how you can too. Jay Massey is a full-time real estate entrepreneur, investor, developer, sales coach, and a problem solver. And he's probably best known for giving advice and strategies to new and experienced investors. And Jay has really one of the most terrific stories. If you're apprehensive about getting started, or you don't know whether you can do it or not, just listen to Jay's story and you'll know that you can. So I'm really lucky to have him with us on the show for you today. Welcome to Get Rich Education, Jay Massey.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, Jay is the host of the Cashflow Diary podcast, so we're talking to a fellow podcaster here. And I imagine, Jay, when you were almost down and out, you never could have imagined being this real estate entrepreneur, investor, and developer like you are today and having your own show. So What's sort of your journey? How did you learn about real estate investing? Where did you start? Where did you get into this?
Sure. And the thing that I want to make sure that everybody hears is you're going to hear a lot of things and you're going to take whatever you take from the story, but hear this if you hear nothing else. Whatever you're going through and facing right now, your story isn't over. There is a new chapter that you have the option to continue to participate in. And that's what you're going to hear, is that some of the choices that my wife and I made so that we could take advantage of that new chapter. You know, a few years ago, my wife and I were in a difficult situation, or at least what we considered it to be difficult. I'll leave and reserve judgment, let you reserve your own judgment, whether you think it was difficult or not. We had experienced a miscarriage, and therefore, when she was pregnant again, we were excited about it. And we were like, hey, this is going to be great. However, when she's pregnant, she has a condition known as hyperemesis. It simply means that she cannot eat or drink while pregnant, which is a necessary activity for daily living, i.e., stressful for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And one day, to blow off steam, I went to go play volleyball. I jumped and landed on a guy's head, punctured my lung, and now I could not walk and talk. So we were quite the pair. We had to begin to make, decisions like, hey, do we keep the electricity on or do we buy food? Which do we want to do today? And that's not exactly the place you want to be, but that was our reality. And it was around then with a credit score of 398, a friend says, hey, you should become a real estate investor, which of course that makes total and perfect sense, right? And I'm like, okay, we don't have a place to stay, but you're saying we should provide housing for other people. All right, that's so far-fetched, it just might work. I don't know. Let's go find out what you're talking about. And you got to understand, my frame of reference at that time is that we were selling our personal possessions on eBay. I was typically doing that from the hospital room, my wife's bedside, because they were doing the oil, lube, and filter change. That's what I call it on her. Gosh. So that she could be able to consume nutrients, etc. And it was stressful, but that was the situation in which we were starting. I mean, I was a self-employed financial planner, and in that situation, you can't exactly ask your clients, hey, can you come over to the hospital so that we can plan your financial future? It's not exactly the setting for that, So selling stuff on eBay was the solution, is what we started doing, or at least that's what we started trying to do. And then he said, you should become a real estate investor, which, hey, at some point, your best ideas, and this is something that I often tell a lot of people, is your current reality is a result of your best ideas. Nobody, even you, no one woke up this morning and said, I am going to aim straight for the bottom and let's go, baby. No one said that, which means every day you've given it your best, and your best has resulted in what you currently call your reality. And if your reality is something less than what you hoped for, it's your own fault. And if you're willing to take that responsibility and move forward, then you can begin to make the necessary adjustments and changes. And that's what we had to do.
Yeah, so that's almost hard to imagine. A lot of real estate investors are out there thinking, how can I add more rental units? Sure. How can I extract more cash flow from my existing rental units? They're thinking about where other people live. And for you, you needed to provide for yourself and your wife and just try to have your own place to live.
Right.
So you're making decisions on, what do I want? Do I want heat or do I want to eat? So exactly. How in the world does someone go from the mindset of, I'm thinking about survival and I want to survive, to I want to thrive and be a real estate investor? I mean, mentally, how does one turn that switch on?
Yeah. And the thing is, you can't turn a switch on that you don't know exists. And fortunately, if you surround yourself around, the right people who believe in you, my wife and I, we pray a lot. We go to church often. We were surrounded by the people that, enough of the right people that said, you can do something, that we were willing to believe those and ignore the ones who kept saying going to get a job, because that was the common advice. Go get a job, go get a job. And it was like, why? It's not going to be any different than the last job I had. So I didn't want one. And that's the one thing I was certain of is what I didn't want. And that just led to having to make different decisions and being willing to do different things. And at the end of the day, for most of us, the fundamental thing we must learn to do is create value in a new form. We package our time inappropriately currently, and that's really the challenge. Most of us sell our time way too cheaply to employers. And I'm not down on, employers or employees. I mean, the relationship works for those it works for, which is great. But many of your own listeners who, if you're listening to this, you're probably likely the one trying to seek a way to produce more value in the marketplace. We just measure that value in something we call currency or US dollars. And that's pretty much it. But you've got to take that process. I have an 8-step process that I teach in, that through those 8 steps, one of the beginning things is learning how to allocate your time so that you can create more value in the marketplace.
Yeah, a lot of people just do undervalue their time. They're not acknowledging that their time right there probably is their best and highest resource. So those 8 steps sound like a great way to start out.
Indeed.
So I guess, how did you know when you had really reached a turning point, when you and your wife had pulled out of this situation and you're really turning the corner from being, almost destitute to being the corner where you can see that there is a glimmer of success in front of you? What did that look like?
I don't know that anyone, quote unquote, ever arrives, because we always can dream up something new and bigger and better. But I will say, I remember when, after we were going through the whole, because we were squatting in bank-owned property. And I remember what it took to find a new place to stay. And I remember I was afraid to ever try to go anywhere else, because I was like, I don't want to increase not one expense ever again. I don't want to go. And at that time, it was like, we think we had a total of 3 kids in a 1,200 square foot apartment, and in 2-bedroom. We were just, it was ridiculous, because I was afraid. And then I was talking to my CFO, and we were looking for a new place to rent and all this other stuff. And it took convincing that we would be able to move out and live. I was like, no, you don't understand. Something bad's going to happen. But that's when it began to hit me that maybe we have recovered, so to speak. And then I remember I went down to a car dealership, and they asked me what I did. And I didn't really think much of the answer. I just told them I'm a landlord, I own property. And they asked me, oh, okay, so how many houses do you own? 3, 4. And at that time, I was around 117. And I said, 117. And they were like, what? I'm like, what? And it shocked them, and they brought other people over in the car dealership to come and talk to me. I'm like, what in the world is going on? It was an interesting experience. So, there were little things like that began to tell me that maybe there is something different about what we were doing, that began to give me some clues.
Yeah. What real estate vehicle did you use in order to create this change in your life? I mean, there's so many different ways you can go, from rehabbing to wholesaling to fix and flipping to buy and hold to, where did you really find your niche?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I tried many different things. I still like the idea of tax deeds and liens, more deeds than liens. And that was one of the first ways I learned to locate property, and it taught me the process. Tried short sales, but I learned out that they were really long purchases, and it took forever, which didn't suit me at all. I tried the fixing and flipping, and it was more of a fix and flop experience in my case. And at the end of the day, it turned out that I needed to be wholesaling. I needed to buy things at a discount and sell them at a discount, which I found interesting, because that's exactly what we were doing with eBay. Is we were buying things at a discount, from a garage sale or in our own garage or our friend's garage, and then reselling it on eBay, still at a discount. And it was the same process. I'm like, you can do this with real estate? Wow, crazy. More commas than zeros, obviously. But at the end of the day, it was awesome. And it got to the point my wife, I'd come home, she was like, so how was eBay for houses today? I was like, really? That's where we began to find our first bit of traction. And then that we graduated from that because I was like, man, we keep passing off all these houses to people and they keep earning money month in, month out. And I wanted some of that. So I was like, okay, what are we going to do? How do we buy and hold a house using none of our own money or credit? And then we had to learn how to do that. And then it became, okay, well, can we buy 30 houses at once? And then we figured out a way to do that. And then it became, I know the next challenge, because people kept telling me, it was very frustrating. You can't do that. They kept telling me, they were so set, they were so sure, you can't buy a house with no money, no credit. Then we went and did it. You can't buy 2 houses. I did it again. Then you can't do this. You don't have this. I understand what I don't have, but watch me go do it. And then they got to, you can't do it in an apartment building. Okay, here we go. And now people don't, they don't really say that so much. But at the end of the day, that's what it was. It was like I just kept doing everything that they said I couldn't do. And I was just pushing myself. And we settled on apartment buildings. So we have a fair amount of those right now, as well as we have a fair amount of mortgage notes right now that at this moment we're looking to transition out of those. And then we have a commercial building, a cell phone tower, and we're working on a resort with some friends as well. So it was just a growth process, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, so I'm hearing people and a network really helped you get into the growth process, something that people just sort of overlook and forget about sometimes. We live in a more virtual world, but it still comes down to people and looking someone in the eye and getting them to know them to get you into the right thing. So you mentioned wholesaling. Mm-hmm. My audience hasn't been exposed to real estate wholesaling yet, and that you had to use little or none of your own money. So what's wholesaling, and how did that become successful for you in helping pull you up?
Sure. Well, let's be clear. Wholesaling got us started, but the major thing that they've got to learn, and if they fail to learn this one thing, everything is off. They must learn how to eventually raise private capital, or more importantly, access the resources of other people, not just their money, but other resources. That's going to be the explosive super secret that's going to take their business to the next level. But as far as wholesaling goes, wholesaling is you see it happen every day. You just don't think about it. You've got to learn how to find a property at a discount, less than retail. And then you take that same property, put it under contract. So when I say buy, it doesn't mean you actually are paying money for it at that moment. And that's the other thing people must be aware of. You got to become aware of the time frame. Just because you put something under contract doesn't mean you need the money that same day. And that's what a wholesaler takes advantage of, is they go out there to put a property under contract, and then they go to their database and say, okay, guys, here's the property we have. Which of you want it? And then you work with those people in your database to find out which one wants it, and you get them to close by the time that you originally promised the seller that you were going to close by, and you get paid for putting that together. That's the process that begins to set a lot of people free. And it took 5 sheets of paper. So that's exactly what it takes. It takes 5 sheets of paper to do that. And if you can figure out a way to obtain 5 sheets of paper, and you have a shot at making that happen. And then from there, like I said, once you begin to learn the process, the thing that's going to explode, that explodes everybody's business, is learning to raise private capital.
Yeah. Listeners, listen to what Jay's saying. It sort of reinforces the quote that I've brought up before. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Jay drilled down and started to learn how to do the right thing. First, find the right thing. Spend time in that. And then only once you found the right thing, which is wholesaling for Jay, then concern yourself with doing things right. Those 5 sheets of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I often tell people, you got to be willing. And this is the thing. If there's one thing that I believe our school system has done a disservice to us with, I'm sure there are many, but there's one thing for sure, is that it has taught us that there's no value in failing whatsoever. We don't know how to fail properly. We haven't learned it. It's actually a skill set. learning how to fail. And I tell people all the time, you got to fail fast. You got to fail forward. You got to fail frequently, period. And if you can successfully manage that, then you're good. But if you don't do that, you're never going to learn and get the feedback you need. And that's what really failure events are. You weren't a failure. You had a failure event. What does that mean? That means there's value in learning what didn't work so that you can make an adjustment. It's the necessary feedback so you can make those course corrections. And you've got to be able to go, okay, I had another course correcting day. And sometimes those course corrections are painful and they take longer than we want. But at the end of the day, that's what's valuable is the course corrections. I mean, the reason you and we all read other people's books is because we can't live long enough to make the mistakes that they made. We're trying to shortcut some of the process if we possibly can. And you got to listen. And that becomes the value of a mentor to guide you through just the street knowledge, because you can only have so much book knowledge. You've got to have the street or experiential knowledge to carry you through to your goal.
Yeah, and real estate is really one of the last frontiers where you don't need a formal education to make a great income. So you can see why I have Jay on the show today, listeners. He is really speaking my language with his stuff. So you're listening to Get Rich Education with Cashflow Diaries. Jay Massey is our guest today. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. For Get Rich Education listeners, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. My pick is Garrett Sutton's Loopholes of Real Estate. That shows you the tax and legal strategies used by the rich for generations to benefit from real estate investments. I read the book myself. Loopholes of Real Estate tells you how to open tax loopholes for your benefit and close legal loopholes for your protection. I like Chapter 3, where Garrett makes the knowledge dynamite boom on real estate leverage and cash flow. I don't say this often, but it's one of the best real estate investing books I've ever read. If that's not enough, you get Garrett's own voice reading the audiobook, and Get Rich Education listeners get it free. To get yours, go to audibletrial.com/getricheducation.
Hi, this is Tom Hopkins, and I can't tell you how smart you are to be with Get Rich Education and make these ideas you.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education with our guest today, Jay Massey. So, Jay, I've told my listeners about how you don't just want to be concerned with getting your money to work for you. That's really not the best and highest use of leverage. Use other people's money in a way that serves them and benefits you. And you discussed raising private capital, and that sort of has a connotation of you're using little or none of your own money. So how do you go raise private capital from others?
Yeah. Where's the money? That's what you're really saying.
Yeah.
Everybody asked that question. And indeed, I had to too. And here's the thing. I want people to understand something. You may be listening to me right now and have $10 million in the bank. Wonderful. Great. The challenge is there's more than $10 million worth of deals in real estate for you to go out there and acquire. And therefore, you don't have enough money. Everybody, I don't care how great your credit score is today, everybody is going to run out of their own resources, period. And at that moment, you're going to have to make a choice. Am I going to stay small? Am I going to become more efficient with what I have? Because that's what some people do. And what I mean by that is they started out with single family houses, and then they start selling those single family houses to try to then get larger loans for, maybe fourplexes and bigger. Or they learn to access other people's resources. See, the gift I was given with all of our difficulties at the beginning is that I was forced to learn how to access other people's resources from the beginning. I never had a shot at all under any circumstances of using my own resources. I couldn't do my own rehabbing because I'm mechanically incompetent, period. Do not even give me a hammer. I didn't know how to do property management. I didn't know how to do any of those things. So I was forced to learn how to build a team and access other people's resources from the beginning. And that is the key to your business ever becoming something that has the type of impact that most of us desire having. The key thing is just understanding that it's more than just about the money. It's about accessing other people's networks. How do you get that to happen? Because that's important. It's mandatory, and it's not a skill set that's taught, unfortunately. And it's one that's caught through making tons of mistakes, or, you got to find that person or persons who have the ability to do it. And as a corollary to that, because of the way we got started, I didn't have at my disposal the ability to go rent a conference room or try to do a fancy PowerPoint or keynote presentation. And I didn't have the network of investors naturally. I didn't have a lot of those advantages that many of you listening have. When you're going down, nobody really wants to be around, if you get my meaning. So you've got to learn how to build with complete strangers. That's literally, I had to build with complete strangers over time, everything, so that we can get to the point of going, bam, here we go. This is how we do it. And one of the things that frustrated me as I was going out there learning is that many people would say from stage or from wherever, you can do a deal on the back of a napkin. We did this deal on the back of a napkin. But nobody ever showed me how. That's all I got. I can afford a napkin. Okay, so if that's what I can do a deal on, can you please show me? Nobody was able to do that. And I had to develop our own resources. And that's what an entrepreneur does at heart. You develop your own resources. I've heard it said that entrepreneurs are those people who are willing to jump off a cliff and find their parachute on the way down.
I like how you put that. So listeners, I think this is something that some of you can connect to. If you're afraid that you don't have the education, or if you do have the education that you don't have the resources, Jay and his wife, not only did they not have any down payment money, they didn't even have their health.
Yeah. Sorry. When you say have down payment money, it made me chuckle. Like, I would have wanted money for food and electricity first, but yes, exactly.
So how does a beginner start to raise private capital, to use other people's money, even to get a down payment for the deal? I talk about using other people's money with a 3.5% down payment with an FHA loan, and then you can borrow the other 96.5%. But you're talking about using none of your own money. I mean, how does a beginner get started?
Not only am I talking about using none of your own money, I'm also talking about using none of the bank's money. I mean, to date, at this moment, we've done tens of millions of dollars of transactions, raised tens of millions of dollars, and I've never used a bank at all, period. Now, that's beginning to change because the deals are so huge now. But the point is we've not done any of that traditional lending. I don't know how to fill out a 1003. And for those of you who don't know that, that's like a loan application. I don't know how to fill one of those out. So don't give me one. It's something I'm not familiar with. I don't know how to do that. I know how to teach people and teach you how to position yourself as an expert in your local marketplace, because I've done this in many different countries, Lithuania, Estonia. I've done it on cruise ships for people all across the US, etc. And I know how to teach a person to build a network around themselves where they are the expert. And because you become that expert, you have the ability to then have a particular conversation with certain steps in place to get them to want to do business with you. And that's literally what you must do. That is the process.
So listeners, if you don't have a certain credit score, you don't fit in the bank's debt to income ratio box, you don't have a down payment, you don't have liquid reserves in the bank, I think the lesson here is that you don't need it. This is real estate.
Right.
Often, if you don't know of a way to do it, you just haven't learned about how to do it yet.
That's exactly right. It's not about you at the end of the day. Even if you have all of those resources he just mentioned, I say you're handicapped because you don't know how to do it if those resources go away. For example, if the banks suddenly stopped lending, obviously that's never happened, right? But if the banks suddenly stopped lending, no loans, period. How many of you know how to go out there and buy a piece of real estate? How are you going to do it? You still got to do business, but there's no bank loans. Do you just sit at home and suck your thumbs, or what do? You got to figure it out. And having that skill set gives me great confidence, regardless of the marketplace I'm in, because with that skill set, if I don't need a lending institution, I only need the legal right to own property and people to conduct business with. Because the one thing that happens across the entire planet is that people have problems. And sometimes we can leverage their resources, either money or property or their network, to help that problem get solved. And that's what you're really doing. I've heard real estate investors be referred to more as transactional engineers. than anything. And that's a skill set that you develop over time. The key thing is, how can you develop and work with ordinary, everyday people, as opposed to what some people say? As soon as I know somebody was thinking, as soon as you said raising private capital, they suddenly started thinking about Wall Street and hedge funds and all of those things. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. In fact, when we have a cell phone tower, that's one of our major customers, becomes a hedge fund. It's like, cool, here, go have the cell phone tower. That's fine. What I'm saying is, how do you work with the person next door? And that's what we literally teach a system and show people how to do this while working through Starbucks, which sounds crazy, but you always have an office and people are willing to meet there. It's great. It's like, I've done a lot of real estate transactions at Starbucks, and it's like, it's so counterintuitive. It makes no sense, but you just got to understand. It's what was available to me. And I didn't know that I'd be teaching other people how to do it one day. I didn't know that I'd be showing people how to do deals on the back of a napkin. I didn't know I'd be that guy. I just knew I was trying to feed my family. I wanted to eat. I want to have a place to stay. I wanted my kids to have clothes. And when you're clear on what you're fighting for, you'll do whatever you got to do.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. So we've determined that one doesn't need an office. One doesn't need any of their own money if they want to go ahead and learn how to raise private capital. But what faculties would you say that one needs that might be interested in learning how to go out and raise private capital, as far as how much time allocation is it going to take? And is there any particular character trait that they need?
Yeah, well, the character trait is perseverance. And secondly is integrity. Third is humility. You've got to be willing to fail. It's going to hurt. Yeah, to fail. And you've got it, which means you're going to have to fail. You may have an entire day of nothing but failure over and over and over and over again. And then you've got to pick yourself up and do it all again with the new information that you just gathered and see, okay, well, let's make this change. If I make this change, do I fail again or does it get better? And you've got to get addicted more to the process and progress than the result. And those are the things. So we talked about 8 steps, or we at least mentioned it lightly previously, and the 8 steps really quickly. I don't have time to go into all of it, but in the 8 steps, you got to start with desire. That's step number 1. It's the one thing I can't give any person. You've got to bring that to the table. However, if you have that, step number 2 is understanding how to package your time. Like I said, you got to package your time properly, which then leads us to step number 3. What you should be doing, and here's the key to your real estate business, is in step number 3. Is developing new skills or talents. You've got to learn to take your time and package it in such a way that you are investing to produce new skills or talents. Here's what I mean by that. I am naturally an introverted and shy person, which means starting conversations is not my strong suit. However, in a business environment, it doesn't serve me at all. And public speaking was something I'm deathly afraid of. Go figure, right? Today, I mean, I've been on stage with Robert Kiyosaki and 4,000 people in the room, broadcast to 90 countries. You better be ready when those opportunities come. So one of the basic things that happened is I had went to Toastmasters. Now, I didn't go to Toastmasters with the intent thinking one day I'm going to be on stage with Robert Kiyosaki and 4,000 people in the room. That was not it. It was just a necessary piece to the entire puzzle, is learning to communicate. Primarily as entrepreneurs, that's what we must do. We must learn to communicate our vision and our ideas, and do so in such a way that inspires and stirs people such that they are able to be moved to act. If you can't move people to act, you're dead in the water. And you've got to learn how to do that. Some may have more natural talent than others in that area, but we can all learn to do it. And when you learn to package your time in that way to gain those new skills and talents, then you're on your way. You got to learn to sell. And I know that's a 4-letter word for some people, but it is what it is. There's no escaping it. Anyone who says things like, well, I just want to do real estate, I want to sell stuff. Well, you might as well quit now, because you got to sell stuff. And I don't care if that means you're just selling the lender that this loan is good. You're selling someone to be a part of your team. You're selling the seller to give you their house at a discount, or you're selling the person on, here's how your money is going to grow and work with us. You're always in that sales conversation. There's no escaping it. And you've got to learn how to have a predictable conversation. Like I said, when you're failing fast, failing forward, and failing frequently, the one thing you don't want to be doing is to not have a system so that you can evaluate performance, your own performance. And that's what we had to develop. We had to develop a systematic conversation that allows people to know why they did get the money and were successful at raising capital in the conversation and why they didn't. And if you fail to have that, you're toast. It's just not going to work. You're going to be haphazardly making changes and you don't know why it worked or why it didn't. And that's what I had to do. I had to fail my way through that process. And then we started documenting that process. And that's really what happened. It's not like, again, I didn't wake up one day with the intent of teaching and doing these things. I was trying to eat. And then in that process, started documenting what we were doing that worked. And fortunately, a lot of it worked. It was cool. And it's been working for other people now, too.
Yeah, that's significant. And that's significant, which is greater than success. So, see, I've got Get Rich Education. Jay has Cashflow Diary. And I think Jay would agree with me that, okay, yes, our mission here is to acquire wealth. And when you acquire wealth, you've achieved what society calls success. But that's not the end. If you can go beyond success and create value for others and have significant positive impact on their life, you go beyond success. You go into something called significance. And Jay has become significant in what he does. So, hey, Jay, why don't you let my listeners know where they can find out more about you and how to raise private capital?
Absolutely. As you alluded to earlier, we have a podcast on iTunes. So cashflowdiarypodcast.com. And for those of you, I actually produced a video series that describes the tool. You want to know how to raise capital on a napkin. I created a tool in a video series that goes along with it so that you can learn it. And you just go to cashflowdiary.com/money tool to be able to go out there and learn how to have conversations at Starbucks, on the hood of your car. I don't really care where you do it. The point is you're in an environment where you're dealing with real people and you can access real money to go out there and provide real jobs, real clean, safe, affordable housing to people because you have access to those things. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/money tool.
Every listener owes it to themselves to at least check that out. Hey, Jay, it's been great to have you on and hear your inspiring story. And congratulations on not just your success, but your significance.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Get Rich Education podcast, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.